Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar hosted by Compliance One Group. Today's topic is on preparing your organization for your annual fire door inspection. My name is Josh Brees, and I am Compliance One Group's Physical Environment Inspector specializing in fire door compliance and will also be your facilitator today. Today's presenter is Craig Stouffer, also with Compliance One Group, and I've had the pleasure of working with Craig for 16 years as a public safety officer. In addition to Craig's multiple emergency medical training program certifications, he is a certified National Fire Protection Association Fire Inspector 1, Fire Plan Examiner, Fire Inspector 2, and Certified Fire Protection Specialist. With a rich background in the fields of criminal justice, fire compliance, and life safety, Craig efficiently applies his training and career experiences to benefit the Compliance One Group's clients. For all of you joining us today, you have joined in listen-only mode, which means you are all muted. We encourage you to type in any questions you may have throughout the presentation in the question pane, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. If any of you have any further questions or think you may need assistance meeting these requirements Compliance One can offer, our services to help you achieve your goals. If you need further assistance, my information will be available at the end of this presentation. Now, I will turn this over to Craig.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Craig Stouffer with Compliance One Group here. And what I want to do is talk about your annual fire door inspection. It sounded like a very simple process, but sometimes it's not. We've been really pursuing these for about 2 years now since the requirement came down. And we've learned a lot of lessons and seen kind of the ripple effects of having these fire door inspections and kind of the problems and opportunities that are created from this. So what we're going to talk about is this whole process today, from how we get from our picture on the left here, how do we legally get from a tagged fire door to not a fire door written in Sharpie, which doesn't sound appropriate and probably is not. But we're going to talk about the proper way to get from A to B. So before we get into that, I want to talk to you about what passive fire protection is. And it's the concept that we break our buildings, and we're going to talk about hospitals, into different compartments. And we protect those openings through those compartments with fire doors and other hardware like fire dampers. So the key to good passive fire protection is that we have these compartments that can be sealed, and they stay sealed in the event of a fire or smoke occurrence. So let's talk about fire. What happens? This is what we're primarily guarding against, is fire inside our compartments. So if you look at remember back to what fire is and what it requires oxygen, heat, and fuel. And we, on our day-to-day workings inside of a hospital, and also by the design of the hospital, we limit the amount of fuel, the amount of combustibles that are allowed inside a compartment. And we also, more importantly, limit the type of combustibles. We don't want things that are like gasoline or things that burn very quickly or at a very high temperature. So we limit the amount of fuel by good housekeeping and good designs. We put only things in our hospital that don't readily burn. And then with our compartments, we control that second side of the triangle. We can control the oxygen. So if anybody out there barbecues on the weekend or semi-professionally, they know the difference between barbecue and grilling, right? So if we have a barbecue, we load up our vessel full of fuel, and we start it on fire, and then we control its temperature by controlling the oxygen. We control those vents. And we can turn off our entire operation by just closing those vents, and it shuts down the whole process. Where on a gas grill, we control the fuel by turning up and down the either liquid petroleum or natural gas supply to our burner, and that's what controls the amount of heat output that we have. So let's think of compartments as kind of a barbecue style where we have an oxygen-controlled fire. And then we rely on our sprinkler systems to control the heat. That's kind of their function, is they turn the heat down in the event of a fire situation. So some key concepts about compartmentalization is we divide our facility, our hospital, into smaller and smaller compartments. And we limit the amount of combustibles in each side of one of those compartments, and we control the air inside of one of those compartments. And again, that's the job of that door. The job of the door is to stop that fire from spreading out of that compartment. We keep it inside that compartment. So why is this unique to healthcare facilities? So most types of occupancy, call it a school or a mall or a movie theater, or what we call assembly occupancies. And those are built and designed on the premise that most people inside of that facility can self-rescue, they can get out. Well, in healthcare occupancy, it's much different. We design these hospitals built on the concept that not everybody can self-rescue. Sometimes they have to shelter in place, and they also have to rely on the staff to participate in the moving of those patients. Sometimes they're having surgery, sometimes they're on a ventilator, sometimes they're giving birth, all these different things. And we have to prepare for a fire occurring at any time. And so these fire door inspections are very critical to this whole design aspect because they're kind of the weak link. They're those doors that are moving and getting beat up all the time by the carts and the beds coming in and out of these rooms. And that's why it's so important that we inspect them every year. And they actually do work. Here's a great picture of, this is from the unaffected side of a fire. Once the fire door was opened, you can see through that opening just the devastation that this fire has wrought upon this building. And on the other side here, it's relatively unaffected. Probably during that fire event, other than being some smoke, we probably could have stood there and had a conversation for quite a long time. These doors this is probably a 2-hour rated door. You can see on the other side of it just completely destroyed. Temperatures are probably 2,000 degrees or so. And on this side of the door, it's relatively unaffected. And that's what we want to happen if we do have a fire event. We want to contain it in a compartment. So let's talk about what a great job healthcare is doing by this design. It really is working. If you look at some of the data coming out, this has been going on for years. This is years from 2012 to 2014, according to the NFPA. As they accumulate data from fires, the fire departments report this information to them. You can see that almost 84% of all the healthcare fires are limited to the object of origin, the thing that caught on fire, the trash can, the grill, the laptop, the bed, whatever it was caught on fire. And more importantly, you can see that the fires have been limited to the room of origin and more importantly to the floor of origin. That's kind of where a compartmentalization kind of starts. So these fires very rarely get past that second compartment. Maybe they might get out of the patient's room or out of the kitchen, but they're not going to make it very much farther. So this design process does work. It's working very effectively, and we have a great record inside of healthcare. But we have to work diligently to control this process. So you can see here on this little pie chart that just like in your home, cooking fires are the vast majority of all fires in healthcare. And that's why we pay real close attention to the kitchens inside of healthcare facilities. Those are their own compartment. They're usually sealed up with very good fire doors, and they have their own extinguishing systems over those cooking. But we can also talk about these other causes here, from heating, electrical malfunctions, and also this other one up here I want to draw your attention to, intentional fires. So there have been occasionally some intentional fires set by human activity inside of healthcare facilities, and of course they are where you least expect them, and in areas where there is no cooking or anything else. So just to drive home this point, this is kind of a graphic video I want to show you, but this is just like a normal, this is a dialysis center, could be emergency room or anywhere else. And this is just a routine day, people getting treatment, and this is, we call this an intentional fire. You can see the struggle between these two individuals in your screen, and he's dumping gasoline on another patient and letting him on fire. So that is not the time to realize that your fire doors don't adequately work. You want to make sure that before that event, your fire doors have already been tested, and they're going to close properly and keep that contained inside that compartment. Here's another example. This happened this year down in Philadelphia somewhere at a hospital. I think it might have been a psychological unit or some sort of memory care unit, but a lady was able to smuggle in some smoking material, and she was also on oxygen. And so her clothes and her bedding were super saturated in oxygen, and she kind of caught herself on fire and ended up dying. But that fire was limited to that room of origin and just her bedclothes, and she was able to be put out, and she eventually died from it. But that's not something you expect in a normal patient room. It's all of a sudden you have a patient burning. But that's, again, why we have doors in those rooms and on our compartments. Okay, so let's get into this fire door inspection process, where this thing all started. So the CMS memo that came out this year in 2017, it's 17-38, Life Safety Code, requires that in healthcare occupancy, fire door assemblies are required to be annually inspected and tested in accordance with the 2010 NFPA 80 standards. We call it NFPA 80. It relates to fire doors. And this next point is kind of what I really want to drill down into today. It says in healthcare occupancy, non-rated fire assemblies, so non-rated doors, doors that are not tagged, including corridor doors to patient care rooms and smoke barrier doors, are not subject to the annual inspection testing of NFPA 80. So non-rated doors should be routinely inspected as part of the maintenance program. So I'm going to be very clear about this. Non-rated doors, the ones that don't have a rating tag on them, just need to be inspected by your facility. They just need to make sure that they close and they latch without any special inspection scrutiny. So the memo further states that full compliance with annual fire door assembly inspection and testing in accordance with NFPA 80 is required by January 1st of 2018, so really quick. And then if any violations of this standard are defined or located, deficiencies are associated with the annual inspection and testing of this fire door, they should be cited under this K211 means of egress. So that's kind of where this whole thing started. But the key words in here are non-rated door assemblies and non-rated doors. That's what we're really going to concentrate on today. So we've been doing a lot of door inspections over the last couple of years, and this is what we run into. Not so much this kid, but we find these hospitals have what we like to call now door pox. So not skittle pox, but door pox, and they look like this. So you can see in this life safety drawing, this is a small facility, and every one of those green circles there represent a rated fire door. Not a door, but a rated fire door. They have some sort of a 20-minute, 30-minute, 45-minute rating on it, and those are all subject to NFPA 80 scrutiny, according to the CMS memo. Now, you can also look through that drawing, and you can see those red boundaries. Those are all our 1-hour firewalls that require a rated door, and 1-hour rooms. You can see there in the stairwells and things like that. So those are where the doors are actually required. So if we go through the process correctly and we start removing some of these door pox, you'll see that after my overly complicated slide completes, that a lot of these doors, if we go through this process properly, may not be required to be inspected in your facility. And I want to talk about that process. How do we get from door pox to no door pox? And you can see the majority of our doors and the majority of our repair and inspection expense have just been eliminated by going through this process. So let's talk about that. And that's what we're really going to get into. So in this process, it's kind of the typical healthcare kind of thing. We want to assess and identify your problem. We want to identify and fix your problem, and then we're going to prescribe some sustainable solutions so in the future it's very easy and very predictable to control your cost and your repairs. So let's talk about this step one. So step one comes by accurately inventory and locating all of your barriers, the penetration in those barriers, and your doors. And those require very accurate and up-to-date life safety drawings. So I want to make a distinction here between life safety drawings and architectural drawings, because architectural drawings are not life safety drawings. They use different terms that have different effects, and this is what we find a lot of. So bad life safety plans cause unintended problems like door pox. So a common thing we run into all the time is on the life safety drawings, we'll run across this term, 1-hour fire smoke barrier is used. And this term is usually just meant to define a smoke barrier. But because that word fire is used in that definition on the legend of the life safety drawings, we need to hold it to that 1-hour requirement, which means rated fire doors. So I'll get to this back to that term in a second. But life safety drawings, let's talk about what they are. So the Joint Commission requires life safety drawings to contain these following items: a legend that clearly identifies the features of fire safety, areas of the building that are fully sprinkled, locations of hazardous storage, locations of fire-rated barriers, locations of smoke barriers, suite boundaries, such as the size of their identifying suites, and the location of designated smoke compartments. We also need to know the location of the chutes and the vertical openings and shafts, and we also need to have on those drawings any approved equivalencies or waivers that have previously been received by your facility, so that we know how to deal with those when we encounter them. So now what they know what they are, let's talk about what they're not. Life safety drawings are not blueprints or construction documents. So kind of the bright line that I found between these two types of documents is that construction drawings are meant for the purposes of constructions, and they use terms that come out of the building code. Well, the thing is we maintain the life safety features according to fire code. So these terms, there's not always interchangeable. They don't connect between NFPA, fire code, and also building code. So it's kind of, the difference that I see is that building code kind of identifies the way a wall or a barrier is constructed. So if it's called as a 1-hour fire barrier, there's different ways to build that. So they need to go through and find the proper UL standard for building a 1-hour fire barrier, where in the fire code, it just talks about not how it's built, but what its purpose is. So that kind of says this needs to be a smoke compartment, this needs to be a corridor wall, this needs to be a 2-hour fire barrier. And that is kind of the difference between these two. And they're different animals. And if you don't understand it, they can cause you all sorts of problems by giving you door pox. So here's a really good answer that I found from Brad Keys, who's our go-to life safety expert. And this is from his website. And a question was posted on his website by possibly one of you guys, but somebody out there. And it says, are smoke compartment barriers considered to be fire-rated barriers? The architect that we have doing our drawings wants to call the smoke compartment wall a 1-hour smoke fire barrier, which to me means it is both and must meet the most restrictive requirement or both. So remember about 6 slides back, I've seen this term before, this 1-hour smoke fire barrier. That is a construction term, not a life safety term. So here's the problem that it creates, and this is what Brad points out in his answer, which is several pages long, but here's some key points I pulled out of it. Smoke compartment barrier is not a fire-rated barrier. So smoke compartment doors, the doors in these smoke compartments, such as 1 3/4 inch thick solid bonded wood core doors, or they should be constructed in a method that resists fire for not less than 20 minutes, do not require a rating. Okay, so that means that a non-rated door in a smoke compartment is just fine. So here is the bright line between the point I'm trying to make here is that rated doors require rated closer, a rated latch, rated frame, and annual inspection. So you can have an unlabeled 20-minute equivalent door, which is solid bonded and 1 3/4 inch thick, and a smoke barrier, and that does not require an NFPA 80 inspection. The problem is that as soon as the inspector sees a rating on it, a 20-minute rating, now it is subject to that inspection criteria and requires all the trappings that go along with a fire door, such as a labeled frame and a rated closer and all those things. So Brad goes on to say further, if the barrier in question is truly a smoke compartment barrier and not a fire-rated barrier, then there is no reason to label it a 1-hour smoke fire barrier, and there is, quote, significant danger in doing so, unquote. A surveyor may read the drawing and see the words fire barrier and hold your barrier accountable for meeting the requirements of that fire-rated barrier. So in practice, what could happen is that on the life safety drawings, or what's presented as life safety drawings, when you see that word fire, that means that all those doors, especially if it's a 1-hour fire barrier, need to be 45 minutes when you might already have 20-minute doors installed. So that can cause a problem. So there's 2 ways to get to this accurate door inventory, and we've gotten there both ways. So we kind of get there before the life safety review is conducted with good life safety drawings, or after the life safety review with great life safety drawings. So there's disadvantages of starting before you have the life safety review. So one of them is that if we don't have good life safety drawings and we go in and we do a door inspection at your facility, we are going to find all of your doors that may not even need to be required to be inspected. But because they're not accurately defined in an excluded barrier type, we might identify deficiencies that you now have to repair. So I'm going to say that again. If we find deficiencies in doors that have tags on them, that have ratings on them, and the life safety drawings aren't absolutely clear on the corridor or the wall type, the barrier type, you might be stuck repairing doors that you probably shouldn't even be inspecting. So the issue is, though, that most facilities are up against these inspection deadlines. And so they want to get these inspections done, and I get that. And we run into this all the time. But often we're just hampered by this lack of accurate life safety drawings, and the lack of accurate life safety drawings equal door pox from that other video or the other screen I showed you. So, but there is an advantage. If we go through and do your door inspections before we have a good life safety review and before we have good life safety drawings, we still get your inspection out of the way, no problem. And it also, we create a good catalog of all your rated doors. So we go through and we find out every single rated door in your facility if we don't have good life safety drawings. So that's not all bad, because that's kind of one of the steps we need to do anyway. But the issue is that when we have, after an inspection, you kind of need to get busy on identifying either get rid of those deficiencies by fixing all your doors, or get busy finding a way to exclude them from your list of doors that need to be inspected from the first place. And the way we do that is with an accurate life safety review and accurate life safety drawings. So let's talk about this, identify kind of the solution to here. And this is kind of a multi-step process. So step one is when we want to review all of your life safety drawings, see what you have in front of us, and see what they're calling out as walls and corridors. We want to review and understand your building code. So what's unique to your location, to your county or your zoning area. And we need to also calculate all your smoke compartment sizes. We need to identify the areas in your facility that are sprinkled. We need to identify all your hazard areas. We need to identify your shaft and hoistways. We need to locate all your existing wall barriers. And we need to locate and identify all your rated and unrated doors. So this is kind of step one, kind of do a self-inventory of what's going on at your facility and what standard you're being held to. The next step is we need to go through and verify those features. So we need to poke our head around and do an inspection at your facility and verify those life safety features such as barriers and chutes. We need to look above the ceiling, we need to look in your trash chutes, we need to look at the doors and make sure that everything is the way it should be. So when we look on the plans and it's called out as a 2-hour wall, it really is an accurate 2-hour wall. That's really what it is. And we also need to understand any upcoming construction plans or renovation plans that your facility may have planned so that we know how to best leverage those against what our proposal could be. So we need to identify exactly what construction codes and standard your facility is being held to when the hospital was built and what standard it's being held to, because those change over time. So step 3 is we need to formulate a plan. We need to formulate a plan to leverage the existing code with the goal of accurately identifying only the required life safety features in your facility. And the reason that's important is because maintaining unneeded life safety features is expensive. So we want to eliminate the rated fire doors where they're not required. We want to take advantage of all that money that was spent on sprinkling your areas. A lot of facilities we go to were constructed before sprinkling has been taken place. Well, now that they have areas are sprinkled, we can do things like create suites, and we can lessen some wall ratings. We can increase some smoke compartment sizes sometimes in some types of facilities like ASCs. So barrier requirements are generally less in areas that require hazard areas, and suite sometimes offer advantages to sizes and maintenance. Kind of an important thing. We see suites a lot in like emergency rooms. So rated fire doors and corridor walls can be decommissioned, and I'll get to the decommissioning process in a second. But that's very important. If you have a hospital full of patient room doors that are rated doors, which we see a lot of times they're rated as 20-minute doors, unless the life safety drawings specifically spell out the wall, the barrier that those are located in as a corridor wall, they still need to be inspected. So that's an important fact. Okay, step 4 in this review process. We also need to identify all the authorities having jurisdiction and all the different stakeholders involved in your facility. So this is just an example. There's probably more, but all the authorities having jurisdiction in your facility include your accrediting organization, like the Joint Commission, your state fire marshal, your local fire marshal, your local jurisdiction, your in-house risk manager, your insurance carrier, your in-house life safety expert. The state health department could be another player in this, and also CMS. All these different people all have a stake and a say in how your facility is being managed at some level. And also it's important that if we go through this process and we propose any changes, we also have to be very open to the idea that if any one of these authorities say no to our plan and we can't persuade them to say yes, then the answer is no. So if our local fire marshal is on board but our state fire marshal isn't, well then the answer is no. So that's kind of the risk we take, and if anybody's dealt in code, it's like 50 Shades of Gray. There's no black and white in this stuff. A lot of it's open to interpretation, but a lot of it requires some education and some thoughtful presentation and some code backup. And if we do that in the right way, we can hopefully win the argument. So one of the last steps in this is we need to submit your plans. So if we make any changes, like so for example, you have one of those walls that's called out as a 1-hour smoke fire barrier, and we want to upgrade it to just a 1-hour or just a smoke compartment. So we're going to change in your life safety drawings so that we don't have to maintain all the doors in that barrier as 40-minute rated fire doors. We're going to submit our plans with the drawings, the code references, and the requested variances to all those stakeholders. We're going to submit those plans with our argument, and we're going to be prepared for any questions they have. So each stakeholder probably has a submission process, a form that we have to go through, a different process that they hold, so we need to be prepared to follow all those different processes. And we also need to prepare to justify what we're asking for. We need to prepare for them to challenge our request, and we need to present the code reference to them and on our kind of our rationale. And then when we're through this process, we need to make sure that we get written documentation of all the variances, everything that's approved. We need to make sure that we have in writing, because that's going to go forward with this project. And if we get approval for changing some of those walls and some of those barriers, we need to execute our plan. So part of that execution is to clearly label our smoke compartment. So if we've downgraded something from, say, a 1-hour firewall to a smoke compartment wall, we need to clearly identify that wall. And it really helps with the staff so they know that during a fire event or a smoke event, when the alarms go off, they know where to rescue the patients through. They require staff to interact and help with the patients. The staff really needs to know and be reminded where those smoke compartment barriers are. And the last step in this is the decommissioning of rated fire doors. So we have been involved in some projects recently that involved about 1,200 rated fire doors. And we've gone through this process, and we're in the process still of getting final approval, but it looks like we're going to be able to remove over 700 rated fire doors from their annual fire door inspection by following this process. So it really saves, if you think about how much it costs per door to inspect and also to fix and maintain those doors to the NFPA standard, it's going to save this facility lots of money over the years. So the decommissioning process of rated fire doors, this is after this is the last step when everyone says yes. Then we need to systematically develop a rating tag removal process to identify through paperwork and process how to go through and identify the doors that we're going to remove the tag from, and then we actually remove the tag and we destroy the tag so it can never be reapplied. And so those doors are now instead of being rated 20-minute doors or whatever they were, they are probably just 20-minute equivalent doors, and they do not require an NFPA inspection going forward. So here's a fictional case study. We're going to walk through the process. So our fictional case study starts with a real small ambulatory surgery center. It's pretty new. It's built in the last 15 years. It's fully sprinkled. It's freestanding, so it doesn't have any other business occupancies in its building. And it's about 15,000 square foot. So we go out to the facility, and this is what we see. It's presented with this floor plan. And these aren't real good life safety drawings. This isn't what they're supposed to look like. And you can see on the plan on the left there, it just has 4 operating rooms, kind of typical setup, and that red line that kind of cuts through the middle of that building is called out in the legend as a 1-hour firewall. So the problem is that when it's called out as a 1-hour firewall, that means that the doors in that firewall all need to be at least 45-minute rated doors. And all those doors are going to require latching, rated closers, and rated frames. And in reality, what we come to all the time is that really, this wall is really just supposed to divide a smoke compartment. The other issue is that when we go through and do our assessment, we find out that in this building, there are 48 labeled fire doors that all need to be inspected because they are rated fire doors. Remember that original memo we talked about? If it is a rated door, it needs to be inspected. So we go through and we now identify 48 labeled fire doors that all need to be inspected to the NFPA standard, which is expensive to maintain. So let's go through our process. We already have an accurate inventory of where they all are. Now let's look at the barriers. We're going to assess where the barriers really are. So this 1 hour firewall is not really required. Our architect will look at this and say, well, you know, in this type of a building, you don't need to have a 1 hour firewall. You need a smoke compartment. You need a smoke barrier. So why on earth are we calling this a 1 hour firewall? So all this wall is supposed to do is create these 2 smoke compartments because we're 15,000 square foot and we're fully sprinkled. So let's redo the life safety plans. So we have 2 options right here. Option 1 is to do nothing. It's the highest long-term cost. We continue inspecting 48 doors, knowing that the average failure rate is about 90% on our initial inspections. So that means that you're going to have to go through and inspect, or you're going to have to go fix about 44 doors at a great cost to you. When in reality, we know that all these 20-minute rated doors in our 1 hour fire smoke barrier are underrated. So the doors that are actually in that smoke fire barrier really need to be 45-minute doors if we don't do anything. So we also need to enact deficiencies required this thing called interim life safety measures, or ILSMs, is a whole other hassle that we don't even need to be involved with. So let's go to option number 2. So we can conduct a life safety survey at your facility, and we can get our specialized architect who only does this and the life safety experts to create updated life safety drawings. Then we go through the submission process. All the steps we already talked about. And our goal in this process is to accurately assess the requirements of your facility and identify the unneeded rated fire doors and mislabeled barriers. So we get rid of all those overrated barriers that are called out on your life safety drawings and accurately describe them for what they really are. And we do this is what our results. Instead of going from 48 doors, we end up with about 3 doors. And they really are just in the mechanical room, soil utility, and the hazard storage we have. And all these doors that now pass through our green line, which is really just a smoke barrier, only need to be 20-minute equivalent doors. So they don't even require latching. They don't require these other things. So this is a really good plan and a great long-term cost savings if we go through this process. The other benefit is that once we have our good life safety drawings, they're very useful. You can use them for any updates that you do to your facility. Anytime you have your HVAC guys or cable pullers, you can tell them exactly where your wall is, where your barrier is, and you can make sure that they treat it accordingly and they seal up any holes that they place in them. So having updated life safety drawings is very useful to your ongoing maintenance program too. Okay, so we're almost done here. Let's talk about the sustainable solution. So this is kind of me on my soapbox here a little bit. So going forward, once we have our life safety review and we've implemented this, we need to establish a culture of safety, and everybody should be a leader in this process. Safety should be, it's kind of a cliche maybe, but it really starts at the top. We've been into a lot of facilities, and we can tell pretty quickly by talking to the staff and management how much they value their culture of safety. And one of the things that we find is that the facilities that respond quickly to staff observations, so when they report a door is not closing or not opening properly, and those concerns are addressed immediately, they're a lot happier. We find sometimes when we're doing our fire door inspections that the staff will give us comments like, "Oh, are you finally here to fix the door?" And that kind of tells us what kind of facility culture has been established. But also important is we want to document all the repairs to those identified deficiencies. So if we identify the deficiency or you identify the deficiency, especially in those NFPA doors, we need to make sure that all those repairs are properly documented. We also need to be very diligent about requiring above ceiling permits and inspections in your facility. If you have anybody doing work above ceiling, you need to go through your in-house permitting process to make sure that those barriers remain intact. Very important. So those are kind of our first line of defense in our compartmentalization concept. But we need to continue our annual NFPA door inspections and repairs, and we need to challenge our facility and staff to find and repair small problems before they're big problems. So you see this little graphic down here on my screen. If you don't know it, those are called silencers. They're actually little door bumpers. If you look around all the doors in your facility on the frame, you'll see probably 3 holes, or maybe these bumpers will still be there. These bumpers, the lack of these bumpers, are hands down our #1 failure point on all these door inspections because they create holes in your frame and they no longer resist the passage of smoke. So we typed this for probably out of 100 inspections, I bet probably 70 doors in your facility, if they're not properly maintained or haven't been looked at in a while, are missing at least one of these bumpers. So if you challenge your staff to put in a couple bumpers every day, I call it Craig's Bumper Challenge, 2 bumpers a day to all your maintenance guys, you can reduce a lot of these deficiencies that we identify every year just by putting in these cheap little bumpers. So that's kind of my soapbox, and now I'm off of it. So I'm going to go continue here. That's my last slide. And now we're ready for questions. If you have any questions, please type them in, email us in, and we'll sit here and answer them.
Thank you, Craig. At this time, we'll open it up for questions. Please enter your question into the question pane if you have any. We actually do have a few questions that came in during the presentation, so I'm going to pitch these to Craig. Has this process worked?
Yes. Again, these door inspections are kind of new. Everyone's been at it for a couple of years. But yeah, we've been able to successfully work with local fire marshals and state fire marshals and kind of redo our life safety drawings. And again, it's about having the right people on the right team. You need to have the life safety experts, you need to have the right architect, you need to have the right code experts too to justify your variances.
Very good. And what can be done with the current door inspection deficiencies going forward?
Well, if you have identified deficiencies in your facility, you need to get busy fixing them. And especially anything that has to do with latching or closing, it's super important. But also, if you just had a door inspection and you identify deficiencies in what you think are maybe doors that don't even need to be inspected, now is the time to start that life safety review and get those doors cleared off your list of required doors. And with the proper documentation and a proper approval, it all goes back to each one of those AHJs approving what we're proposing, then yes, we can eliminate those deficiencies from even being required.
What can be done if the label's painted over? Can the paint be sanded off, or can the paint be removed and the door salvaged?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. We'll find on frame labels, sometimes we see them embossed or raised letters, and those sometimes we can see. Other ones, the labels are like a plastic product, and they're painted over, and by the time they try to use some sort of a solvent or somebody use some sort of a wire brush on it, it destroys the label. But those can all be fixed. There's companies that can go out, we can help you with those, and we can get those things re-rated and relabeled.
So if a door frame is a fire-rated frame, how do the bumpers pass the fire testing?
Well, again, the fire door frame and the bumpers, those holes, the issue is not if they're going to stop the fire or the spread of fire, it's if they're going to stop the passage of smoke. And so anytime we see holes in frames, that's kind of the issue, is the stopping the passage of smoke.
So any hole, even if it doesn't go all the way through, must have a bumper put in it?
Correct. And the way we look at this is very strict. So when that frame and door was submitted to UL or whoever put it in a furnace and cooked it for a couple of hours or wherever long, it was submitted with those bumpers, and that's how it passed. If it doesn't look like that frame or that door on the day it went through that passing or through that testing, then it's a failure point. But NFPA specifically asks, are there any holes in the frame or holes in the door? And those are both failure points we run into all the time, from removed hardware that's been left unpatched or unsealed, or missing bumpers. Those holes create a problem.
I just also want to clarify that the bumpers can only be replaced in existing bumper holes, that a bumper can't be used on top of a door frame to patch a hardware hole. Is that correct?
Correct. Bumpers need to go into bumper holes. And again, if you're ordering them, they're called silencers. There's the technical term for them is door silencers.
Okay. We have another one here. Where do we obtain life safety drawings from?
Well, your first step shopping is Compliance One. We have a full team of architects and life safety experts who will look at your facility, look at your existing drawings, and go from there, assess what you need. So it's, and again, they're different from architectural drawings. And sometimes we run into this where the architects will just include a life safety drawings as part of your construction package. So we see all the original drawings and the floor plan and the lighting plan, and they just include in there this page called life safety drawings. And that's where we run into these terms that are construction terms that aren't life safety terms, and it creates these ripple effects that we end up dealing with, and it ultimately costs you guys money.
Okay. How can we patch a hole?
It depends. There are approved methods for patching holes. So for example, if you have a door, a hole in your steel door, it needs to be filled with steel, and they usually do that with a screw. If you have a hole up to, I believe it's a 1/2 inch in a wood door, and it's not through, so you have a coat hook that removed from the back of a door, and it leaves a couple of small screws. There's actually one approved fire caulk that you can get for that, made by a company called Fire Door Solutions, and we can help you out get that. But that's the only approved solution for filling small holes in wooden doors. And again, if you start fixing these things, you need to be aware of what's an approved fix. Sometimes if the hole is bigger and the hole goes all the way through a door, it requires a through bolt. And sometimes those bolts and fixes need to be rated. So it's kind of a tricky question. You need a little expertise on that. There's no one good answer for that.
And I can answer this one here. There will be copies of slides available for those that attended this webinar. We have another question about where do you purchase these bumpers from?
I just Googled door silencers, and I ran. There's several suppliers online. Again, if the technical term is silencer, and or probably any of your commercial door supply people.
I'll give it a couple more seconds, but I hope we answer all the questions. Any other questions? Oh, we have another one. Can we do our own inspections, or do we need a third-party inspector? Fire marshal was just out.
So the NFPA 80 talks about this, and they require somebody who is knowledgeable in NFPA 80 to do your door inspections. So if you have people on your staff, or you personally, want to read through NFPA 80, there's even an online class, a little webinar almost, that you can take and take a test afterwards if you're an NFPA member, then I would argue that you are in fact a knowledgeable person. But be very cautious with this, and this is where we run into it. It's not so much that the door is wrong, it's that the placement, that door does not belong there. So NFPA 80 actually talks about just making sure that the door is good, meaning that a 20-minute door would pass an NFPA inspection even if it was in, say, a 2-hour wall. And what Compliance One really brings to the table is looking at your facility as a whole and what the purpose for those barriers are. So if we see an underrated door in a rated wall, then we're going to sound the alarm about that to you, because that's kind of a big issue. So you want to make sure that the person who is doing these inspections are not only just looking at the door, but looking at your barriers and your compartments as a whole. It's very important.
Can you attach a material like laminated material on a fire-rated door?
No, you cannot. And again, like I said before, and we look at this as a pretty strict rule. If that door wasn't tested with that lamination stuck to it, then no. If it wasn't tested that way, then the answer is no. And if you look at the door manufacturer, they allow for like some types of protection plates, and they're generally steel, to be added. And so that's a good question. So I would say on its face, no, unless you contact that door manufacturer and they say yes. If you contact the door manufacturer, whoever that is, and you ask for if this can be attached to the rated fire door and if that'll affect the rating, then get that in writing and then go ahead with that. But I would say on its face, no.
In addition, fire code's so strict to even only allow 5% of a door to be covered with a sign, and that's about a piece of paper per side of door, if you can keep that in mind.
And if you look at the way doors are required, so for example, in a 1-hour firewall, I wondered this for a while too until I researched it. Why don't they require a 1-hour fire door? Well, the assumption is that in front of that door and behind the door, there's nothing that's going to be burning. So they only require a 45-minute door and a 1-hour wall. And if we start attaching things to the door that burn, it kind of defeats the purpose of having that rating system. So we need to make sure that we don't have, like, say, coat hooks on your door, because one, they put screws in the hole, but then also have the ability to put things that burn. You can attach a coat that can burn and give extra fuel to that door that may not survive for an hour.
Do the fire doors have to have a label on them, or having it listed on the fire door on our layout enough?
Nope, the door specifically needs to be tagged and clearly visible. So even if we can tell that there's a tag on there, unless you can read the rating and see the manufacturer and see the rating agency, that's going to fail. You need to be able to read the tag.
Fire marshal did look at the life safety plan and the doors with proper rating. Would this suffice as our inspection?
As your NFPA inspection, no, because the CMS requires that every fire door be inspected annually to the NFPA, and each one of those doors need to be documented. You can't just walk through your facility and say, all my doors passed, I look at them all. They all need to be serialized, so you know exactly which door you're talking about, and they need to be clearly identified on whatever chart or whatever documentation system you're using, either Excel or some proprietary system. But each one of those doors need to be kind of treated as its own little system to make sure that it is functioning properly.
And we also find in LifeCare a lot doors have been removed that were not initially installed at the time the hospital was built, or the room has changed use. And we physically check the door. There's gaps that we measure, verifying the hardware is in place and all the screws are appropriate for the door assembly. So, and also, are steel fire exit signs that are screwed into a wood door allowed?
The answer to that is no. Unfortunately, it's not. So any screw that goes into a wooden fire door is a failure point, unless it is there in some sort of a UL listed approved process. Sometimes we see through bolts. Other types of exit hardware can be put onto wooden doors as long as they're approved for that use. But signs need to be limited in size, and the only attachment method that's approved is through an adhesion process.
Okay. I'll wait a couple more seconds to see if any more questions clear.
Yeah, if you have any unique situations that are on your door, the absolute best way to find out, and I was kind of surprised by this too, but all these door manufacturers have people, these technical people on staff, and they're usually pretty quick about getting answers to you, I mean, within hours. If you find out the manufacturer of your door, if you can find the tag, send them a picture of what you're working with and say, hey, would you still, does this door still meet your 45-minute rating in this configuration? Does this affect its rating? And if they say no, then the answer is no.
Okay. Does the label need to be installed before a fire-rated door before they install it on site?
Oh, I've had this question before. So sometimes doors are shipped without the labels, or they're in the box with the door attached with them. And a lot of that, I think, is because of the hinge configuration. So sometimes we'll see, this is another huge failure point, is that the labels are put on doors, the doors start to droop, and so they swap out the hinges for those continuous hinges, which cover up the label. So the absolute best place to put those labels, and they're kind of meant to be done on site, is at the very top of the door. People don't pick at them. We can see them with our inspection mirrors. They're still clearly visible. But then if you do opt to put a continuous hinge on your door, you're not ruining that rating by covering it up.
What damages to a fire door require the door to be replaced?
Well, in wooden doors, a common failure point is delamination. So if that thing starts coming apart, if we start seeing the protective covering come apart, another thing we see a lot is damage from running carts into them. If we can see any of the core material, there's only a certain amount that's allowed to be repaired with that. A lot of times we'll see just damage and wear and tear from those things. Anything that can't be covered with caulk. Another failure point we see that's a lot that causes damage doors to very expensive doors that need to be replaced is cleaning staff placing mop handles between the on the hinge side of the door up in the frame. If you ever look at those things, you'll see them all dented a lot of times. And they open these doors and they put their mop handle up there and it props the door open. Well, over time, that starts compressing that door to the point where you can see the core material. You start seeing that white protective material inside the door, and that is a non-repairable door, and it's a very expensive fix.
Can you use BS standard glazing in a UL standard door, in short mix standard?
I guess I'm not familiar with that term. You know, Josh?
Well, I do know that if you're talking about the glazing for the glass, glazing is what they call glass in a fire door or window. The new fire doors actually use a fire-rated glazing or fire-resistant glazing. There's a couple brands out there. But if you're replacing, I don't know what the standard is for replacing existing glazing. We can look into that and we can capture that email and be in contact.
Yeah, a lot of it goes back to what that manufacturer of that door, that rating agency will allow. So a lot of old fire doors you'll see with just a standard plated quarter-inch glass that has the mesh in it, and that was kind of the standard for a lot of years. I would say if you have a rated fire glass that has the stamp on there, that's a brand of glazing, and it gets broken, then it needs to be replaced with that same material. Otherwise, I mean, again, that's how that door was tested, and that's what kind of it needs to be maintained as. Hope that answers your question.
What does it mean to, quote, verify listing, unquote, on the Compliance One inspection sheets?
Okay, we run across this all the time. So everything that's on a fire door needs to be listed for fire use. So for example, if you start looking at your latches, if you look at where the bolt comes out of the door around that little steel plate and call that the latch plate, you should see a stamped F. It might be really small, or sometimes you'll see a ULF. So rated means it's rated for fire use, means it's just rated fire. So on our report, we'll see verify rating. So for example, the closer needs to be rated, the latch needs to be rated. Anything other than normal hinges need to be rated. The coordinators need to be rated. So it's not a failure, and sometimes this is just a matter of finding the model number of that closer and making sure it's UL listed for fire use, which most of them are. But because we can't see that stamp on there, we usually pass it but say verify. Sometimes it's just a sticker that fell off of that piece of hardware, but unless we can see that and know that all the hardware on your fire door is rated, that's what that terminology means.
Okay, we'll give another couple seconds. These are some very good questions. Hopefully these questions will help answer some questions other people have that are in this webinar. Okay, I still have the screen up, but we're going to go to some closing comments, and if anything pops up, we'll be sure to answer it. So first of all, we'd like to thank everyone for joining us today. The recording of this webinar will be available on the complianceonegroup.com/education page of our website, and please make sure to sign up to receive notifications on future trainings we'll be hosting. Compliance One Group can assist you with everything we have covered in today's presentation in preparation for your annual fire door inspections, in addition to mock surveys, life safety drawings, documentation review, life safety asset testing, inspection, and maintenance, emergency preparedness policies and procedures, and hands-on safety and security training. Also, you'll be receiving a survey regarding today's webinar, and we encourage you to please take a moment to complete the survey. On behalf of the Compliance One Group team, we thank you for your time. And it looks like we might have one last question. If hardware is not rated, then does it need to be replaced, or how do you check if it has a rating?
Good question. There's only a couple things are allowed to be non-rated, and that is a standard hinge. It's a 4-inch hinge that has ball bearings. It's kind of the standard hinge that everyone sees. That does not require a rating, but everything else does. And if you don't know if it's rated or not, or sometimes it might not, like I say, it might just be a sticker that has fallen off. Sometimes it just takes a good examination of that piece of hardware, find a model number, find out the manufacturer and the model number, and look up on their web page or contact them to see if it ever has been a rated piece of hardware. They should know. And if you can't find any documentation on that, and you can't find if it is rated, then it does need to be replaced.
So we use that verify listing many times on closers, where if the closer cover covers the entire barrel of the closing body, we can't see the UL stamp or the model number to show that it's UL approved, and we would use that many times for verify that the closer itself is listed. Okay. I'm going to go off script here. Everyone does have contact email for Compliance One. It doesn't look like any more questions have come in yet for this webinar, but you do have our contact information. You can see it right there on info@complianceonegroup.com. If you do have a question regarding anything that was talked about in today's webinar, do feel free to email, and we will get those answers to you as soon as we can. So have a good day.
Thank you.